that's two bricks on where I
Where's
died.
my remote for this TV?
Yeah, that's two bricks. Yeah, I went right. When me and you split off, I went right. So mine is just me.
Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. All right, guys. Welcome to Builders Tech. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be streaming a customer build. Hold on, let me turn that down so we don't catch this. While the customers are actually here watching us do this stream, this is going to be the first in a series of builds that we're going to do for customers. Customers are going to come in and they're going to commission out their PCs. They are going to basically custom build their PCs with us. They're going to choose all the parts and components, and we're going to assemble them for you live on stream. So this will be the first in that series. Today, we are doing a very, very, very nice build. It's going to be a Ryzen 7 5800X and an X570 motherboard. We're going to be doing it in a Crystal Carbide 680X case with an MSI GeForce 3080. Now, I know how hard these are to find. It's extreme difficulty finding this one for our guys. So it's going to be very interesting. This is going to be a very powerful build. The consumer's going to be playing FPS games with this. Also, he's going to be doing some streaming just like I'm doing. Hopefully he can do this. So yeah, so if you guys have any questions during the stream or have any issues, please let me know in the chat. And without further ado, we're gonna get rolling. It's gonna take quite a while. I'm gonna pop the case up here so you guys can see, because this sucker's heavy. We'll put that up. Let's open this step out. So you guys can see this case. So as you guys can see, this is the Corsair 680X. This is a very, very large builder's case. The thing I really like about this case a whole lot is, first of all, it's on a swinging hinge. So when you actually do maintenance on the machine, it actually has a swinging door and a hinge for you to access everything on the inside of the PC. Let me move this so we can hear. So you guys can basically see everything on the inside of the PC for easy access for you to do maintenance. The other beauty of this case is there's a lot of forgiveness here. So on this side of the case, this whole half here, which we'll take apart so you guys can see, This whole half is open for you to put wires. So as you guys can see, as we open the case on this side, so if we look in here, we have all of this space. So all of the space inside the case for you guys to see and do pretty much anything you need. It's a really good case for beginners because you have all this forgiveness right here. So yeah, so this is a really good starter case. However, it is quite large. It's much larger than your standard cases. So looking in here, like I said, you can mount your GPU vertically if you so choose. You can mount it horizontally. There's room in here for fans, fan, plus all your fans up on the top and your rear exit exhaust fan. So switching it around again so we can see inside this case. Lower this down a little bit. So you guys can see on the inside you have a actual commander for you to control all your RGB lights. Comes with it with an LED one and a regular commander for fans. Got plenty of storage space here for drives. Pretty much you can store, gosh, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then plus another cage. You can do up to 8 drives in here. So obviously there's a lot of space. So this is the 680X. This case retails for about $200 to $250. So looking down on the top of the case, which we'll do this. So if we look down on the top, coming down, so you guys can see the top of the case here. So obviously it's a glass panel up along the top here. So if we zoom in a little bit more, you guys can see, obviously I have the fun little pole, this protecting here, so it's kind of glaring it, but it's a glass top here with ridges on the sides for you to be able to suck in air from your fans up on the top. Pretty easy access to get to your stuff as well. Good for mounting radiators if you want to mount a radiator in there. It only will accept a 280 millimeter radiator and it has these really long screws, as you guys can see. So we're going to undo this real quick because we're going to need access to here. So everything's made out of tempered glass. So you can see this glass panel comes out, as you guys can see up on the top here. Definitely want to keep that safe. And then you have physical access inside the case, so we can see all the way down to the bottom here inside the case. So these rails here are where we're going to mount our fans for the top for the RGB. And like I said, the beauty of having this extra little area here, the beauty of having this extra area is there's going to be a million wires with this build. I'll tell you guys right now, there's going to be a million wires. Let's just put it that way. You have each one of the fans have 2 wires coming out of each fan. That's 1, 2, 3. That's 6 wires just on the top. Each one of the front fans have 2 wires, so 7, 8, 9. Plus you have 3 wires coming off the bottom for fans 1 and 2. So that's 10, 11, 12. That's 13 wires from just the fan sets. And we haven't even gotten to the Kraken system yet. The Kraken's going to have another 3 fans. So that's 3, 6. That's another 9 wires. So you're talking about we're going to have 30 or 40 wires, and we haven't even started doing the build yet. Yeah, so it's going to be, that's why this case is really good, because any way you slice it, wire management in this case is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be very difficult for you to manage all these wires. They have it nice and neat here because there's only 2 or 3 fans connected to it, but it's going to become quite a mess on the inside. So this whole area is going to be inundated with fans. A lot of these extra storage bays are going to come out and be utilized for fan spots. You have a 2 terabyte SSD that we're going to utilize, so you don't need any of this. This is all going to be for wires. Literally nothing back here is going to function on the front. It's all going to be wires and connector kits. So in these little cases, in these wonderful cases come our little parts kit, which is really important. You got grommets, then the screws, obviously very important. The screws are really important because every single type of standoff inside of these machines that you guys can see here. So all the standoffs on the inside of this that mount the motherboard, which are going to mount onto here, there's these little screws, these little standoff screws. These screws use a different type of screw. So every single manufacturer uses a different one. So it's important that you keep those wires. And a couple of zip ties and other screws from Random Things. I also highly recommend, if you're doing builds, that you get yourself a nice magnetic screw tray, because it's really difficult to lose screws in a magnetic screw bay. You can buy these on Amazon. There's magnetic screw trays. You can buy them on Amazon for $5-6. So not super expensive at all. All right. Does anybody have any questions before we move forward into the actual build? Like I said, a lot of this stuff is going to come out. And then we're going to get into the actual build. So it's going to take a couple hours for us to assemble this, I'm not going to lie. It's going to take us a good 2 or 3 hours to assemble this to full. We may not do the full wire management part on stream for everybody. We may just do the wire management off stream, because that's going to take the longest. The initial build will be done and all the wires will be back here, but getting it up to my standard of how wire management should be in the back, that could be a whole nother stream. That could take hours to articulate the wires, plug them in properly, route them. So for this purpose, we're gonna do the initial build. You guys will see the front. We're gonna make sure it works, light it up in the BIOS. So without further ado, let's start working. So first thing first. So we'll get the top-down cam coming on this, so you guys can see. So up at the top here. So this is an MSI MPG X570 motherboard. This motherboard retails for about $200. This physical motherboard is Ryzen 3000 ready. It was not Ryzen 5000 ready. The interesting part about this motherboard is this actually required a flash with the processor before we actually were able to use it. So I took the liberty of doing that on the test bench yesterday, so we don't need to do that. So without further ado, let's get it out. But if you're using one of these motherboards, you need to make sure before you install your build and do your full setup that you have flashed this motherboard to accept the new Ryzen 5000 series processors. So as we can see here, let's zoom this in. All right. That's a little too much. Go out a little so you guys can see the actual motherboard. There we go. Okay, so on your motherboard here, obviously there's a bunch of different things to this motherboard. So you have your south bridge, your north bridge. This does not need an I/O plate on this physical setup because it has a built-in I/O plate. You don't have to snap anything into the motherboard. Under the bottom of here is where we're going to install your M2. Your hard drive is going to literally go in here. So we'll take this without further ado. So obviously we're going to mount the CPU here. Let's do the CPU first. Where is it? So here's the CPU, Ryzen 7 5000 series processor, 5800X. So this came out about 2 weeks ago. So you guys can see this processor, this Ryzen processor. So pretty much you're just going to pop it out of the case just like so. On Ryzen CPUs, there's a different orientation than regular CPUs. So Intel CPUs, the orientation is always this way. The writing always goes down towards the bottom of the motherboard. On Ryzen CPUs, the writing always goes towards the side of the motherboard. So if you're looking at your CPU, so let's zoom this in a little more so you guys can see. Let's get real close in on the socket. So we're going to look right at the CPU socket here. So you can see on Ryzen setups or on AMD setups, there's no pins down here. It's actually just a catch area where the pins are all on the CPU. On Intel processors, the pins are actually on the motherboard and there's no pins on the CPU. So vice versa, so you guys can see. So we'll get this Ryzen CPU out so you guys can see this. So you guys can see the processor here. So the orientation of the processor, the writing that says Ryzen is going to go down towards the bottom. You're going to be able, if you're looking at the motherboard from front to back, from this part over, you're going to be able to read Ryzen. So you're going to be able to read that it says Ryzen. The orientation always goes to where the latch is. You should be able to read it straight across. So to install the CPU, it's pretty simple. On the CPU here, they give you a little telltale indicator, and you might not be able to see it, but there's a little diamond or a little spot in this corner. It's gold. This little spot here, and hopefully you guys can see it there. So that aligns up with the motherboard. If we're looking on the actual motherboard, down here there's a little, you can see that little white dot down there. That white dot has to align up with this full triangle. That's how you know that the processor is being installed correctly. You never want to take a processor and force it down. You never want to shove it in. It should seat very simply. So the install process goes as follows. You're pretty much going to take this bar here. You're going to pop this bar up. We'll go wide a little bit more. As simple as that. Widen up the view a little. Okay, and you're going to take your CPU in the correct orientation with the diamond over at the square here. And you're just going to simply take it and you're going to let it sit right into the slot. It should go in easily. It shouldn't be forced. It shouldn't be pried or sitting on the corner. It should sit right into the slot. When you've done that, usually what I do is I take my finger and I rub it around the top here. So if you take it and you shake it, it shouldn't move at all. It should be totally secure here. It shouldn't move at all. Yeah, it should just be solid. Once you have it solid like that, you're going to take your pry bar, and it's just going to be as simple as pulling it and snapping it under. Hey, Sway. And I think this board allows two. There's another slot for an M2 right here. Just FYI, you can put a second M2 here. The actual heat dissipated one goes under here. So there's one here, and you have another spot for another one right here. This way. So we got the CPU installed. It's in the way it's supposed to be, and that's the end of it. There's nothing else that needs to be done for the CPU. So simple as pie. So that's in and done. So the second piece that we're going to do is we need to install our M2 drive. So for this physical build, we got a Mushkin. I never say this right. Mushkin. Let's pull this out. I never can say this right. It's Mushkin. So there's a Pilot E. This is a 2 terabyte SSD drive, ultra fast SSD drive. So we're going to put this in. And this is going to be a simple install. So under the bottom of this little panel here, this Lightning Gen 4 where it says it right here, that's where your SSD is going to go. So we're going to simply unscrew. So we're going to unscrew this. And we could take this this thing off here where it says play hard, stay silent. This is actually your Southbridge fan. So this here, you can see this is going to keep your Southbridge cool. Only on higher end motherboards are you going to see fans on the Southbridge. Take our screws, and once we have it, we're going to slide it off. Okay, and as you can see on the bottom here, if you guys look down, we'll zoom in a little. So the bottom of this, you can see it has this white or this blue plastic on it. What's under here is the sticky shield. So this thing is sticky, and what this thing's going to do is this thing's going to sit on top of your SSD, and it's going to keep it nice and cool. Now, does this SSD need it? Not really. Most of them are self-cooled, but it doesn't hurt. It definitely doesn't hurt. So inside of here, this, oh, that's what, it's down way too low. Let's go up a little. Zoom it up. There we go. Okay, so here is the whole entire hard drive. This is it. So obviously back in the old days, hard drives used to be this big square, you know, and then they evolved to a tiny little 2.5-inch square, which is super thin. And now they're down to this. So this is basically going to be the whole thing. So to install this, super simple. So what we need is a screw. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your 2 terabyte drive, label up where you can see it. There's a little notch here. You're going to stick it into this notch. Let's zoom it in so you guys can see me. Hopefully we can. Hopefully you can see that. There's a little notch here. So you're going to stick it into the notch and you can see it hanging just like this. So into this port here is where we're going to install this SSD. Basically it's connecting it directly to the motherboard. So it's literally directly connected to the motherboard. Let me get, if I have, for some reason, where's the motherboard? So out of the motherboard case itself, you're going to need the SSD screw. Comes in a tiny little bag just like this, okay? Inside this tiny little bag is a tiny, tiny, tiny screw. So don't lose these. So definitely don't want to lose these. If I could get it out of the plastic, that would be fantastic. Okay, so this tiny, tiny, tiny little screw. You're gonna need a proper screwdriver. So this tiny screw here, we're going to take this tiny screw, magnetic screwdrivers help, and we're literally going to put it and seal it down right here. So we're going to take this and we're going to screw it down, just like that. So now, as you can see, this is installed. So you can see the 2 terabyte drive, it's right here, it's fully installed. It's connected where it needs to be connected. It's smooth. There's no pull. There's nothing going on with it. It's nice and solid. That's pretty much it. Once you've installed that, you could take your cooling kit. Make sure the plastic piece, like I said, make sure you take this plastic off the bottom of this, and you're going to reinstall this cover. Once you reinstall the cover, you're just going to screw it down. You're going to screw it all back in. Okay, so now that we have the SSD in, you can't even see that there's a hard drive installed here at all. It's pretty much, this is it. So, zoom back out. So basically we have our motherboard pretty much set and ready. The only thing we don't have is the RAM installed yet, which we will install. That can be installed later, doesn't have to be installed now. Some people like to install it before, some people like to install it after. I personally like installing it after, because sometimes it can get in the way of your wiring. So basically on your board, that's all that really needs to be set up. If you do have a custom cooling kit on Intel processors, you may have to install a bracket on the bottom of this motherboard. On AMD processors, usually they use the default bracket. Some manufacturers don't. I guess we'll find out when we install the Kraken, but for now, we're going to go along with the lines of it's probably going to use the default bracket. And that's pretty much all the pre-prep you need to do with your motherboard. So that's pretty much it. So pretty simple, not too hard. And not too bad at all. So now I usually just double check, make sure everything's seated, make sure everything's tight. This does have a pull off, which I'll pull off later so we don't scratch anything. And then I'm going to put this back in the box. Now, I know a lot of people are worried about different types of static electricity. I know people are concerned about you know, touching things with the floor or using things and then touching your fingers on things for static. These boards in the silicon are built nowadays to discharge static along all of the silicon, so you don't need to worry about it as much. In the old days, people would wear these wrist straps and they'd be really concerned, oh, you're going to discharge and you're going to destroy a component. Can it happen? Maybe. On these, highly, highly unlikely. So obviously you don't want to go dragging this thing across the floor or anything like that. But at the end of the day, static electricity is not something you should be super concerned about. So you can manhandle these boards, you can carry it, we can just go walking down the street, it's totally fine. The boards are very rigid, they're designed for that. So you don't really need to worry about, oh, am I gonna, you know, ruin it with static? We'll pop this up. All right. So we're going to go back to this case and then we're going to start adjusting and installing things. So for this particular build, I did get Corsair SP120 RGB Pro fans. These fans come with their own fan kit. They're RGB individually addressable. We are going to be connecting them to a hub, and then eventually we're going to connect them to the motherboard so they can be controlled using the Corsair software. It's called IQ. In the meantime, so now for some of the boring parts. We're going to uninstall some of these extra bays. A lot of these are unnecessary, so the back part of here, on this case, we're uninstalling just extra bays back here. And usually these slip and slide out. Trying to get this thing unsnapped here from the case. There we go. So as you can see, this whole piece kit here on the back that holds extra storage drives, we don't need this right now. So this component is just going to be put to the side. And what's that going to do? So if you look at the case now, on the inside, we have all this extra space here. Let me, so you guys can see there's a massive amount of space in here for us to put whatever wires we want, because once the motherboard's in on this side, you're not going to be able to see anything behind there. So you can go to town with wires back here. So that's a big plus for this case, one of the reasons why we chose it. So then we got to take this back fan out. We're going to remove this back fan because this back fan is not an RGB fan. Oh, and an avalanche. So we have this fan needed to come out because this fan is not an RGB fan. It's just a default case fan. Has no RGBs whatsoever, so it's kind of boring. So we're going to switch it out with an RGB fan. Okay, so that's all open. The fans that do come on the front of this case, the front side of this case, are RGB, so we don't need to quite worry about it quite as much. These are going to go with all the other different fans and kits, so we don't need to worry about it quite as much. So, cut this open. Go inside this wonderful little Corsair setup. They always do it real nice. You have your connector kits and then your fans. So basically the fans are going to come out of the box, and as you can see, 2 wires per fan. For the time being, let's see. So another beauty of this case, which I think we're going to do for the time being, is you can take this screw out of the top, and you can take this and the door comes right off. So this makes it easier for us to work in it. So now we got that off. So airflow, let's talk quickly about airflow. So a lot of times with these fans, people just blindly install fans in the case. Hey, it's RGB, let's just go throw it in there. What they don't realize is they actually have an airflow direction, okay? And most people don't realize that on these fans, and I don't know if we can see this. Let's see if we can see this. Okay, so can you guys see these arrows right here? There's an arrow on the top of each fan. Usually it's on the side of the fans. So on the top and the side of the fans, there's a little arrow here. And what the arrow is telling you is direction of airflow. So orientation and which way is the air going to go based on this is facing. So obviously if the arrow is facing this way, that means it's going to take air and push it out the back. If you have it turned this way, that means the air is going to come from the back and push it in. So you need to realize this before you install your fans, okay? If you don't realize this before you install your fans, you can put all your fans in backwards, and then you got some are pulling, some are pushing, and it's not going to help you at all. You need to make sure that when you're putting your fans in that you understand what direction that the fan needs to go. What am I doing with this fan? So the rear of the case 99% of the time is an exit fan. Okay, so that means the fan is going to take air from the inside of the case and shove it out into the air. That's 99% of the time, that's what you want. So looking at the orientation, the easy way to know is there's 2 different labels. So on most fans you have like a logo label on the front, and on the back you have this big X, which is the guard where the wires go. The X is a telltale sign of air goes outwards towards the X. So you know if the fan faces this way, air is going this way. If the fan's facing this way, the air is going out this way. This is always the exit. So you can really kind of easily go, oh, okay, this is the exit, I want the air to come out. So the orientation of the fan is going to go like so, if that makes sense. So wire and cable management is important in this. Orienting the fan towards the area where you want to move your wires is important too. So looking at this wire here, so we have this really long wire that they give you with every fan, but where am I going to put this? If we put it this way, the wire is going to go down. If we put it this way, the wire is going to go up, et cetera, right? It doesn't matter which way you mount the fan. The fan's going to spin and do what it needs to do no matter which you can mount it. This, it doesn't really matter. So what matters is this wire. So looking on the inside of our case here, this physical wire, it's like, okay, you have to think about where am I going to put this wire? Where is it going to go once the fan's installed? How am I going to hide this wire? So in this particular case, we have a lot of space, so we don't really need to worry about it. But one thing when you're installing these fans that's missing is there's no motherboard here, so you can't see where am I going to put this fan wire? Well, I can tell you right now, 90% of the time, you're going to mount this fan where the wires are going to go up and through this hole here. So it's going to definitely go up in some form of fashion like this. Now, based on the way I see this orientation, I would not install, I'm looking at this, I would not install this fan until we put the motherboard in there. Because looking at this hole here, it's like, where is the motherboard going to actually sit? How am I going to hide this? I may want to orient it down and run it along the bottom of the motherboard. I might not want to orient it up top. So now that we did that, sometimes you can install it, it's an easy route, and sometimes it's not. So knowing that, we should probably lock the motherboard in first. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll set this down. We're going to lower this desk because I'm not super tall. We're going to go back to the top-down cam. Orient it so you guys can see down, and we're going to mount the motherboard. All right, so looking down, we have our motherboard area where the tray is going to go. We have our 3 fans in the front, which need to come out, which we can do right now too. And the simple reason is this is where the radiator is going to go. So this cool thing about Corsair, which I really like, is they make everything really easy. Their cases tend to be a little more expensive, but for good reason. If you notice, this fan comes out all the way as a piece, as one whole connection. So it makes it super simple for me to take it and move it out of the way, do what I need to do, manipulate fans without having to reach my hands around inside of the case. So this makes it super easy. So this is going to have to come out, or we may decide, we haven't decided yet, we may decide to mount the radiator flat to the front here, and we might just mount it right against this and leave the fans where they are. So we'll see. So right here, you have their bundle of wires. This bundle of wires is important. I don't know if you guys can see this, hopefully you can. Yes, you can. So this bundle of wires here is your connection kit. So it comes pre-installed, obviously, from the back of the case. So obviously this looks like a jungle of wires. There's a million wires in here. So look in here. So this is the USB for the front. This is the audio in case you want to plug an audio connector in the front. This is to control lighting. This is to control lighting. Let's see, what is this? This is a fan power control. This is a secondary audio connector. This is to put the power switch. This is for more USB. This is for more USB. So as you can tell, there's a lot of wires going on here. Normally what I do with these wires while I'm installing the motherboard is I take them and I shove them all down. So I'm pulling them down here through the case. I'm getting them out of the way, as you guys can see. So now they're completely out of the way. Now they're completely out of your build space area. That way it'll give you the maximum amount of room to do what you need to do with your wires. And let me know if that's annoying you to repeat. Okay. So we're gonna take our motherboard here, as you can see, and it's easy to orient your motherboard because you know where the exit port is here. That's where this big block's going to go. So you're going to swing it around. You're going to take your motherboard. You're going to sit it in real nice. And you're basically going to line it up with this hole and let it sit. Let's go down even further so I can see in. How's the zoom? That looks good. So you guys can see we're going to line this motherboard up. You can see where all the holes are. So ATX. Boom. The motherboard is actually down now and it's on the actual pegs. Then you're going to take your huge set of screws that came with the motherboard, your bag of little shorty screws. Get my secondary. Put some screws in here. So one by one, we're just going to install screws. Like I said, magnetic screwdrivers help greatly with this. You need to make sure you're using the right screws. Usually they're the shortest ones that come with the batch. So one. These don't have to be tightened super tight at all. They just need to be tightened enough to the point where they're snug. You don't want to over tighten screws on anything in here ever. Over tight is bad. Get my yellow driver. So 1, 2, So usually there's 9 screws. You have your screws along the edge. There's a screw up at the top here you don't want to forget. This is where magnetic screwdrivers come in really handy. And a quick word about magnetic screwdrivers around electronic components. So again, back in the day, magnetic screwdrivers used to be a no-no in computers. And the reason being is most of the parts, they use magnetic, certain chips that were sensitive to magnets. They don't use those anymore. Old school mechanical hard drives still are sensitive to that, but nowadays, like this hard drive here, if we were to take this HG old school, this hard drive, and we were to run a magnet along the top, you would erase data on this. That's why you weren't allowed to use those drivers. Nowadays, doesn't matter. None of this is sensitive to magnets. Snug. This is the kind of boring part. So just make sure you get a screw in every single hole. And the reason why you don't want to miss any holes with screws is when you install other components, it's going to leave a gap where you could literally crack your motherboard by pushing down too hard. Each one of the motherboards, they have parts where they're strong on these bolts. So it makes sure that none of the other parts of the motherboard are rigid or aren't flexible. You definitely don't want to flex. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, give your motherboard a tug. Make sure it's nice and tight. It is. Okay. So now that we've installed this motherboard, now we can take a look at our fan and see, okay, so how are we going to install this fan now? So with the motherboard in, now that this motherboard's in, how are we going to install this fan? So obviously it's still an exhaust fan. So looking at wiring, you're like, okay, there's a lot of space here. So, but my orientation would have been wrong. I think the orientation would be best if we did it this way. Okay, so we're going to take our wires, we're going to dunk them where we want them to go. Okay, so now we're looking at this wiring. We're looking down, now this fan, which will move the case so you can see it. Now this fan is going to go in and you're not going to see any of the wires. And we're going to take the screws that we just used to remove the other fan, we're just going to put it right back in. Super simple. So obviously a drill driver is very handy. For first time builds, I would not recommend using a drill driver on machines. A lot of people over tighten with these. Yeah, turn it to the point where it's not going to turn on. Give me mess in there. And one more. Okay, so our fan's in now, the way it's supposed to be. We already pre-wired it, so we're plumbed here, so that's good. Now what we need to do is pay attention to all the other wires and put in all the other fans. So this orientation at this point, normally I would do routing and wiring, but I think what we're going to do first with this one is, since this Kraken is just a massive GPU or a CPU cooler, I think we're going to get the Kraken out and I think we're going to start figuring out how that's going to go. So we have this sucker right here, this Kraken Z73. So this is a 360 millimeter liquid cooler. So the Ryzen series processors tend to get really hot. I mean, we're talking smoking hot. The Intel ones get hot, but not anything like I've seen on Ryzen systems. We went with a 360 millimeter massive cooler to keep it as cool as we possibly can. The cooler you can keep the CPU, the less throttling you're gonna get, and the more performance you're gonna get. It also opens you up to the ability to later to massively overclock the unit if you so choose. There will be a mild overclock put on this, and kind of an AI-based mild overclock. But later, it'll open up the potential for you to massively overclock the system if you so choose. If you so choose. And you can ask me later on how to do that. I will show you how to do that. Oh, did you drop a screw? Oh, definitely need that. Rubber grommet, definitely need that. Okay, so opening up this Kraken. So as you can tell, this thing is just absolutely massive. So inside these kits, obviously you have the radiator itself here. And it's protected by this because like most radiators, you gotta be careful not to damage the fins. If you ding or bing these fins on this thing, you could do some damage to the radiator. So you just gotta be really careful that we're not damaging the radiator. And as you can see, it has a really long extension cord, which is going to lead to the actual unit. That allows us with this unit to mount it in the direction that we want to mount it. So looking now, so you can see this cooler unit here. We're going to install it. You can't see it on the front, but on the front there is where this radiator is going to go. And we're going to wind this around and it's going to sit right here on top of your CPU. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do is wind it around and we'll figure out the best orientation. We're going to wind it around and it's going to sit just like this. So your LCD screen. The beauty of this Kraken setup too that I really like is it does not matter which way you install this. You can turn this screen to make it right side up. So they thought about that because a lot of times first time builders have trouble getting the wires right to orient it so you can see front, facing. So it's not like crooked or anything like that. They made it so you can just turn it. Me, I'm a perfectionist. We'll just do it the right way the first time. So looking at this, obviously this radiator system is, like I said, it's very massive. We have our fan kit here that we're going to mount it against on the front here. So I think what we're going to do is I think we're just going to mount it directly to these fans. And I have to think about, it comes with obviously 3 fans from them that we're not going to use. And a fan connector kit, which once again, we're not going to use. It also comes with a connector kit, which is really important. You need to look for the AMD connections. So it doesn't look like, this is for Intel. Here's the fan screws. So the question I have is how are we going to install it? Okay, so we take the standoffs off. Got it. Okay, so on this motherboard, it looks like we're going to have to take this off and it's going to use a separate system. Which we're going to do. The only downfall about this is the thing's going to fall through, so we need to do this vertically. So this plate back here there's a plate back here that you guys can't see that's going to fall down. So we need to make sure, which sometimes this is why a lot of people do it beforehand, which we probably should have in this case, but that's okay. So just quickly, we're going to take this thing off. And then we're going to take a look. Usually in the instructions, it'll tell you which one is Intel, which one is not Intel. We need to make sure we're using the AMD screws. Okay, so AM4 screws, okay, perfect. So this bag here says AM4, that is AMD. So we're gonna pop these out. And then, so we can turn so maybe you guys can see this. So there's right on the top of the CPU, and I know it's kind of dark. We're gonna put these in. So these AMD screws just simply go right in its place. So once we've gotten those two screws in, now I can take this and I can go flat down again. So we can see what we're doing, so you guys can see it. So you guys can see here. So I had the screws, there's two screws here, one here and one here. They're kind of hard to see because they camouflage. So we're gonna take these out. Now that I have that in, it'll stay in place so I don't have to worry about it falling down. We're gonna pull this bracket out. So this bracket piece comes out. We're gonna take the AM screws, there's little holes at the top here, and we're gonna go straight down, facing downward. And these only need to be hand tightened. You do not have to over crank these because you're gonna tighten them later. So it goes down right in its place. Okay, so now all four brackets are in, as you guys can see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the brackets are in and it's ready for the CPU. You want to do that part first. Now, what we need to figure out is the Kraken. So obviously we have this whole fan kit that comes out. So we need to figure out how we're going to mount this radiator onto the top of this. So normally what I tell people is when you're mounting radiators in systems, these radiators, so these radiators here, the way I want people to mount them is you should mount this at the top of your case, not at the bottom. You don't want it to do this. And the simple reasons why is all the bubbles are gonna go to the top here. You don't want the bubbles to sit in the top of this thing and create a bunch of air. You want the system to draw the water up through the top and create a minimal amount of bubbles, so when it's pushing it out, the bubbles get compressed by the water coming down, if that makes sense. So all your water is going to go through these fins. There may be some bubbles down here, but the water is going to be pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. It's going to shove it right back up. But if you have it in this orientation, all the bubbles are going to stay at the top. There's no pressure, and it's going to create a lot more heat in your system. That is a subjective matter of opinion with a lot of people. My personal opinion, I do not mount radiators upside down. You mount right at the top here. So that means when your case is standing upright, it's going to look like this, if that makes sense. So thinking about that now, the orientation, how am I going to mount this in? So thinking about this, usually what we're going to do, somehow it's going to need to go just like so. So thinking about that, you're going, okay, well, how are we going to screw screws into there? So usually they come with pretty long screws for that. And I'm trying to think, how are we going to hold this on? So I think what we're going to need to do, in this particular case, I think we're going to need to do is we're going to have to take these fans off. And then this came with ultra long screws, which we're going to have to do is run a screw up through the bottom of this piece, and it's going to stick out the top here, and it's going to screw right into this radiator holding it down. Then we're going to put the other three fans right on front. This thing's going to be a rainbow unicorn barfing rainbow unicorn. Yeah, it's gonna be. So this, the cool part about Corsair cases too with these is these are all magnetic. So you can pull this out. It's called a dust filter. snaps right back in magnet. This is what you want to clean when you clean your system. When you go into clean, all you got to do is take this magnetic filter off, dust it out, wash it off with water, soap and water, stick it right back on when it's drying. So we can see here, and then let's go top down so you guys can see. So you guys can see here, and this is way too far. So you can see here this fan tray. They make it super easy. So all we're going to do literally is we're going to replace all these screws with long screws. That's literally all we're going to do. We usually check the length too. So the Kraken came with these long screws. So all we need to do is just kind of put it up to it and go, is this going to be long enough? So as you can tell, looking at this screw, absolutely, it's going to be long enough. Okay. Hi, lady. If you guys don't know, we're streaming live out of my store, the Gamers Garage here in Oakdale, California. It may get weird. I'll just leave it at that. So we're going to take these long screws that you guys can see. We're going to take these long screws and we're going to replace all of these screws with long screws that will go up into the radiator and hold it into place. It causes a lot of extra work, but the beauty of it when it's done is you're going to have RGBs on the front control, so it's going to make this radiator even more cool. You're going to have it bringing in air on the front, okay, and then on the back you're going to have it pushing air out. So literally it's going to push and pull it right through the radiator. It's going to be cool. Cool as in cool, and cool as in cool, if that makes sense. So where's my handy dandy little tray? We're gonna have to go to round 3 tray. So in just about 5 minutes here, we'll take a quick break and move on to the next piece, maybe a couple minutes. This is obviously a very boring part, but a necessary part as we remove all the screws. So we have all these screws are out, and here's our tray. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take our radiator out, as you guys can see. Get awkward. So what we're going to have to do is just get one started so it'll stay. And then obviously you want your radiator. This is where it gets kind of tricky because you don't want, got to be real careful with this. Yeah. There's me long boys. So we're going to get this started. Hey Wizard, how you doing? Yeah, it's been a while, dude. That's for sure. So this is why you leave things in the bag. So for this mount, we're going to do it real carefully. You do it sideways, get the screw through. And once we get one in, it'll make it a lot easier for the other ones. Want to take this screw, we want to align it with the radiator top and start it. Now these radiator screws, they actually have a stop at the bottom of each one of the screws, so you can't screw it through into the radiator. There's a middle metal stop in there that prevents you from destroying your radiator. In the old days, again, they didn't have the stops. So people would literally be installing these and then they would drill a hole right through the radiator because they weren't being cautious with the screws. They weren't using the proper screws, or they were installing them incorrectly. And they would do a hole, they literally would put a hole right through, which is really, really, really bad. And the manufacturers got wise and they're like, okay, we're tired of taking all these RMAs. You know, and people complaining and not buying our stuff anymore because people keep destroying the radiators. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the ingenious solution of, hey, let's put a stop under the bottom of there, so no matter how hard they screw it in, it's just going to tighten to a point that stops. Okay, so now you can see the beginning of what we're starting to do. So now looking at this, I'm starting to think, wait a minute. This is an exit. How is this going to go on the front or back? Where's the fans for the front? Now you're starting to think, wait a minute, which fans are going to go on the front? Was this installed on the proper side? So if you got to think about the orientation, I don't think this was installed on the proper side. So kind of live and learn as you install these things. Wait, this goes. You want to make sure your orientations are right, otherwise you're going to be removing a lot of fans. Let's see. It's going to go. Up. This is going to go up. Remember months ago? You can put the radiator on the top, yes. You can also put it in the front too as well. It's just the radiator needs to be, the ports need to be at the top of the case. If that makes sense. So hang on guys, we're gonna take a look. This makes it a little easier for us to see. So we wanna make sure the radiator goes in properly and is connected properly and is on the correct side. Now, this orientation I have it set here does not look like it's correct because the radiator is gonna be too far in, so we're gonna have to flip-flop this. So this is where all the little meticulous part comes in, where you got to pay attention and make sure that the orientations are going right. So looking at it this way, so this orientation goes in this way. So yes, so we need to mount it like this. Hopefully you guys can see this. So this radiator setup needs to go like this. That's why it's super important that you install one and just make sure you double check and make sure the orientation is correct before you go on and install the whole darn thing. So obviously we had it backwards. We don't want it backwards. We want it installed properly. So So wires going outward towards the case, that's what we want. Okay, so this orientation looks much better. What's the difference does the orientation make? As I explained earlier, the orientation sway is big difference. All the air, you want all the air bubbles to not be at the bottom. You want the tubes to be at the top, because what happens is all the liquid goes down, forces all the bubbles out and through the system. If you have the tubes here, if you have the tubes at the bottom, there's nothing pushing it at the top. So, 1 second, guys. So yes, you want the tubes to be at the top. You want to force all that air out. Now you don't want to tighten these screws down quite yet. You just want to get them in. Just want to make sure they're all the way through, they're in the proper spot, and they're just snug. You don't want to tighten them over down yet because you're going to stick your other fans in. You just want to get it in so it holds the radiator in place. Okay. So what you guys can see here on the front here, you can see the fan orientation now that I have. I have the front fan here, okay, and then the radiator unit is on the back. This is going to feed out towards the back, but the fan is still going to be facing forward, drawing air in and pushing it towards the radiator. So we're going to install all the other fans with the same orientation. We're going to install them in the same direction. So we just want to make sure we don't cross any wires. We're going to take this fan just like this. We didn't tighten anything down on purpose. You don't want to tighten it down because you want to have loose room for it to move around. And you're just going to take your fan just like this and you're going to slide it in. And then you're going to continue installing your screws. So hopefully that explained its way, that the orientation is highly dependent on Okay, once the second fan is in, you can tighten these down a little more. There you go. So second fan, almost done. Okay, so one more screw. You get these 3 fans in, guys, and we'll take a couple minute break. Okay, second fan in. Now onto the last fan. Once again, make sure the wires are facing the proper direction. We're just going to take this sucker. If it doesn't fit, you want to loosen up the screws a little bit so it'll slide right in. It should just slide in. Got it slid in. Screw it down. Perfect. And one more screw, which I don't know where it went. And for now. Okay, so all the fans are oriented the way they're supposed to go. tighten these down in a star pattern, kind of like you're doing a wheel on a car, so they stay snug and you don't get gaps. So just do any way you want, just upper left, lower right, lower left, upper, you know. You don't want gaps between your fans, you want them to be nice and centered. All right, so now as you guys can see, our fans are in, our radiator's in on both sides. We can tilt this down and start working on the other part. So, so we're gonna take a couple minutes break, guys, so I can use the restroom, and then we'll resume in about 4 minutes. We're gonna install the radiator into the machine. Then we're gonna get more of these SP120L fans. We're gonna put 2 on the top. We're gonna put 3 on the back side of this and 2 in the bottom. We're gonna wire all that in. Put our Kraken in, get that wired, and then we'll move on from there to get to GPU. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes, guys. So hang tight, okay? All right, guys, we're back. So where were we at? So we were installing the radiator here real quick. So we have the fans on the radiator here. You guys can't see this below. We have that going. So we're pretty much ready to put this back in, which I'll do in just a second here. And then we'll move on from there and just keep installing. Like I said, we have several more fans to do. We still have to install the CPU on. We still have to connect a lot of these connection kits, which we'll do later. And get a lot of the wiring and RGB working, which we'll do later. But in the meantime, let's see. So we're going to tilt this down. We're going to go top down again. Dust filter on the bottom. Actually, you pull these wires through. We'll install this real quick to make it easy on us. So many wires. So real quick, guys, we're going to install this radiator back in. Okay. So we got this radiator installed back in the way it goes, and I'll make sure all the wires are pulled through. Okay, we'll hold this up, and then down we go. Make sure we're not crushing any wires. Okay. So let's go to the top-down cam. So looking top down, we now have our radiator installed in the front with the 3 fans oriented the way they're supposed to go. This thing is ready for our other fans. So we have, what's the second kit? That's a 120 kit. I have another one around somewhere. Where did I put it? There it is. So I have a whole nother kit just for the front of this fan setup here. So, and a lot of these RGBs, like I said, we're going to do the wiring at another time. We're not going to do all of the back wiring on this stream because it's extremely boring and it'll take hours. And there's going to be hundreds by the time we're done, there'll probably be about 100 wires back there. So, we're going to get these fans out. And we're going to pop them on. So utilizing these little bays, there's obviously quite a bit of bays here for us to do pretty much anything we need to do. We're going to utilize these to hide the wires. Could you use an example with the Z63 with only 2 fans to cool the Z63? So Sway, if you're going to do the Z63, you're going to put it up top here. You're going to take this radiator and you're going to orient it up top. It doesn't matter which side it's on, but you're going to put it at the top of the case, not on the front, if that makes sense. You would mount it up top because the Z, I believe, The 63 is the 280 millimeter one, and that can go right up on the top here. For this instance, we use a 360 millimeter radiator, so it needs to be mounted on the front. This case doesn't have the space on the top, and if we went any bigger, the case would be massive. We're talking double. That other case we were considering would have been probably about this much longer. I mean, it would have been just massive. I think too long. So what's going to happen here with these fans now? So thinking about how we're going to do these fans, so we're looking down in our case again, fan positioning is key. You got to think about how am I going to do these fans? So we're already pulling air in from the front. Okay, so we want to help pull it out too. So there's two different ways you can do it. You can do a push-pull system where the fans basically are pulling air in, or you can do what I call a squish system where you're going to put the fan here and it's going to draw air in and pull it right through the radiator out into the case, and then it's going to exhaust out the back. That's what we want to do, okay? So this makes it super easy. Now the only downfall, I need to find radiator, we need to find screws. Where's my bag of screws? Luckily I have a bunch of spares. We need more of these long boy screws to go through the radiator into the top, and I just hope they are long enough, which they are. So unfortunately these don't come, as far as I know. Let me double check if one of these packs that they come with long screws. To do a setup like this, this type of setup, you usually need to have a custom set of screws for this. We're doing something that is not normal for building. Yeah, this does not include long boy screws. So the problem is the Kraken radiator itself gives you enough screws to mount 3 fans on the front, which is fine and dandy. Problem is we're mounting 6 fans on the front and back. So it only comes with 9 of these screws. Luckily, I have a million of these laying around. If you're going to do a build like this, you need to buy fan screws, either from NZXT or over the manufacturers. You need to buy extras of these, otherwise you will not have enough screws to mount it on the front. Does that make sense? So luckily, I have a bunch of extras. So we're gonna mount this just the way we did the other one. Thinking about wire and cable management, wires down. So looking down on the case, we want the wires to go down in. So we want these wires to go down and in. So pushing these wires through where they belong. And this case is so easy to build in because it's so spacious. So we can already see what I'm going to be doing here. We can already see this fan here that I installed, which you'll see on the top down. You can already see where we're going with this. So like I said, you wanted it to be rainbow unicorn, we're going rainbow unicorn. This is going to be a massive amount of RGB light. I mean, literally to the point where you don't even need a light in your room anymore. You just turn this thing on and you're good. Oh yeah. What would be the point if we couldn't change the colors? No, yes, you'll be able to change all of the colors. So you can go red, you can go white, you can go RGB, you can go flow. The software will allow you to do a million different things with the lights. Okay, fan 1 on. Dose. And this isn't even going to be all, because there's going to be another 2 here and another 2 here. Told you. So 2 fans, that's a 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, there's 13 fans. So 13 times 2 is just 26 wires. So just think your fans are going to have 26 wires in them. Hey, you wanted RGB, we got it. We weren't playing around. install. So, as we're screwing and screwing and screwing in all these fans, obviously a lot of screws. And more screws. Oh, it's a lot of screws. And a lot of fans. Two more. See, once again, this is why I don't like installing the RAM or anything before doing this, because of the simple fact that it just gets in the way. By the way, the RAM's RGB too. I don't know if you know that. I'll show you guys that when we install it, but that is also, every single RAM is an addressable RGB. There's no strips in here. You don't need no strips. I hate the strips anyway. They go out all the time. They're cheesy and they go out. Okay, so you guys can see this huge 360 millimeter radiator. We got fan, 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 pulling, pulling. So it's pulling air through and pulling air through. So kind of interesting. So it's basically going to squish this thing with air. It's going to be pretty awesome looking. I'm not going to lie. Highly doubtful. Okay, so we have that installed and that's done. So now I think I'm going to install the actual CPU cooler to put it in place. That way it'll be out of the way for everything else. The good news is we don't have fans or radiators going down here, so that's super simple stuff. So you got to be really careful with this, because on the bottom of this, I don't know if you guys can see, but there's pre-applied CPU paste. It's already pre-applied on this thing. So you don't have to apply CPU paste to this at all, unless you screw up, which we may do. I don't know, we might screw up this. So the first things first, this is a little guard they give you to put on there to make sure so you don't touch it while you're doing things. So we're going to take a peek at the manual and make sure. It might already come in AMD configuration, or we may have to switch out this bottom piece. We'll see. So AMD and Intel retention. Okay, pre-installed is the Intel bracket, so we need to take it off. So this bracket here, usually you turn it gets turned. You push down and turn and pull it out, and then it comes with an AMD retention bracket. Once again, it's going to be really simple. You're just going to put it in here, turn, and there it is. So now our AMD retention bracket's in. So orientation-wise, right? So like I was telling you before, there's an LCD screen on here which will have more RGB. It's going to tell you what's going on inside the CPU. It's going to tell you the temperature of the CPU. It's going to tell you the temperature of the system. You can also change this out for a custom logo of your choice, and it'll stream it. Yeah, you can do whatever you want. So wires here, you don't want to kink up these wires. You want to keep them as flow and as free as possible. So some people do this, as you can see. You can see the wires. See how we have like a Z pattern going on with it? Some people turn it this way and go like this. Some people do it in different orientations. So it just really depends on how you want to do it. Now, a little earlier, I kind of fibbed. I told you guys that you can physically turn this to change the orientation of this. I kind of fibbed. This one, you don't change the orientation of this itself. you change the orientation of the LCD in the software. So let's say we put it in upside down, you just tell it flip, and the software flips it upside down to correct it. So I kind of lied. There's another brand made by Gigabyte that makes this as well, that has one that you can just turn. And NZXT's other CPU coolers that don't have an LCD, you can also turn those. So realistically, it doesn't really matter which way you install this, as long as it's vertically done. So see how these brackets here at the top, see how this is a vertical, like a horizontal orientation? You can't install it like this, or you can't install it like this. You have to install it like this, or you have to install it like this. It only goes two ways. Both ways are acceptable for the simple fact that we could just tell the software to flip it. So what becomes more important is how are you going to orient these wires so that first of all, they're out of the way, and second of all, how are they going to look? So my first initial thought that a lot of people do is this way. So that is the Z. My second thought is you can also flip it upside down and do the clean look. So which way would you prefer? You want the Z or you want the L like this? I prefer the L because the wires are less kinked, but it doesn't quite make a pattern with this. So it would go down just like this. Okay, let's do the L. So to install this, it's really simple. So once again, you want to be careful you don't touch this paste when you're messing around with this, even though they didn't really think about this when they put that on. I didn't think about that plastic piece, so we'll leave it like that. We need to make sure that we have the screws to cinch it down, what did I do with these? Because these are really important. We need to make sure we have those screws because we're ready, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cinch this thing down, and once we cinch this bad boy down, it's going to be hard to mess around with it. So let me get these screws out of the way. We'll clean up our area a little bit. It's like, I know I make this look really easy. I know I do. Just like any other thing you're an expert at, you work on a car or whatever, you make it look super and everybody's like, ooh. But I've broken more of these than you guys can imagine to get to this point. I mean, literally I've snapped, I'd say 100 of these. So that's the beauty of having us here do it for you while you learn on your first time, because I've made the mistakes already, if that makes sense. Bottom line is, I've made the mistakes on these already, so you don't have to make the mistake. Because this radiator system is over $200. Okay, so for a radiator setup like this, the last thing you want to do is snap it. Does that make sense? Okay, so we got our radiator orientation. Okay, so the first thing we need to do on our CPU here is make sure the CPU is nice and clean. Doesn't have any residue or anything on it. You want to make sure that, see if we can orient this a little more so you guys can see. So you want to make sure your CPU is nice and clean. It's still locked in place. You didn't nick it or open it up beforehand. You want to look at your thermal paste up at the top here. Make sure it's uniform and even. We're not putting thermal paste on this because the thermal paste is already pre-installed, so we're good. If you did have to put thermal paste on it, just put a tiny little gob on there, pea-sized, right in the center of it, and slap it down. Doesn't need any more than that. So once you have your orientation the way we want it, so we wanted to do it. Is it this way? How did we want to do it? No, we didn't want the Z, right? Just the L. Okay, so pretty much all we're going to do is we're going to orient this. And this is where the tricky part comes in, because there's two holes here on the top. And let me make sure, let's scoot this up so we can really see it, because this is really important. Hang on guys, we're going to move this over. I want you guys to see this because this is a super important part. So we have these pegs here and we have these holes. There's two holes, one on each side. It's very important that they all are in the same hole, and you don't want to put it down and then pull it up and then put it down and pull it up. When you do that, you smear the paste and then you cause air bubbles in there, which could cause heat problems later. So what you want to do, is I find the wing nut that it's going to be in by eye. So it looks like the bottom. And then you get it on there just like this, where it's sitting, and then you press it down with your fingers. So you don't have to go all the way down to align it. You just want to make sure it gets in the proper holes. The holes are going to be offset. So the bottoms are going to be different than the tops, but that's by design. So you're going to take your screws. You're going to take your thumb screws like this, and once again, in a star pattern, lower left, upper right, lower left, any form. You want to do it just like installing a tire. Like I said, you want to do one in there. You want to keep your hand putting pressure like I am on top of the CPU down. It doesn't have to be hard, just firm, and screw these in with your fingers. You don't need to over tighten these at all. So we're screwing those in. We got this one coming in. Okay, and last one. Now you can take your hand off and 3 of them on because it's tight enough. And all you're doing is just thumb tighten them down. We will tighten them slightly with a screwdriver, but slightly. And again, in a star pattern. You always want to do a star pattern. It seals it. As most good car mechanics will tell you, that's how you get wobbly tire. You don't do it that way. And it's the same premise with this. So we're just going to star pattern. We're just going to quickly on here. That's it. Just a very quick 1/4 turn. 1/4 turn until it's snug. And then once again, you just check it, make sure snug. Does not need to be torqued down. You don't want to push the CPU down too far. This is good. Okay, so now you guys can see that our system is installed. So obviously the wires protrude up kind of high, so what we'll have to do is we'll probably just snug them down, or I'll figure out a way to hold them in. But as you can see, our setup here is looking pretty good. So far we got our motherboard installed. We got our cooling system installed. These are the 2 most hardest parts of your build. They're this and this. The rest, to be honest with you, is quite simple. From this point on, super easy. The hard stuff's over. Installing this is always tricky. Installing this is always tricky because you can dent it, ding it, damage it. Now we don't got to worry about that. So the next things I usually move on to now is I install the remainder of the fans. But before you install the remainder of your fans, you want to install your wiring to your motherboard. Okay, it's very important you install your wiring to your motherboard because you need all this space to get your fingers in. So we'll flip it up so you guys can see it. And you can always see there's a million freaking wires back there, baby. A million. There's literally a million. Okay, so let me raise this up so you guys can see it. And I don't know if you guys can see inside the case. I gotta orient these lights a little better because you guys aren't gonna be able to see it as well. But hopefully you guys can, so I'll swing out here real quick. Maybe we'll shoot some light over here. Yeah, it's looking fantastic. So as you guys can see on the front of this case here, so we have our cooling kit, everything's installed, it's nice and vertical. We don't see any wires anywhere, we see nothing, okay? So the initial, where you're at this point, you should have it to the point where you're looking at it and you don't see anything going on. All the wires need to be in the back. Take a look and make sure everything is tight, oriented the way you want it oriented. Nothing's backwards, nothing's loose and hanging. All the wires are done. But this thing looks pretty fantastic. So now we're moving on to the wiring. Okay, so from the back, I mean, there's a million wires. So wire management for me, a lot of this, like I said, it's going to take some time for me to get all these cables zip tied and wired. When you open the back, it's not going to be perfectly clean, but the wires will be zip tied and where they need to be. But that's why this case is a beautiful case for people to start in, because I literally can almost climb in here. There's so much room for you to hide stuff. It's like having an old Chevy, you know, with them big old engine bays, and then the engine's like this. And it's like you can just climb in there and like lay in there. That's basically what this is. You got a lot of room to do what you need to do and hide the imperfections and all this extra wires, because most people don't realize how many wires actually go into these things. Okay, so we're going to connect some of the most important cables. Power cable, then we need to start mapping out, okay, so where are these going to go? And we haven't even installed the power supply yet, by the way. That will come later. The power supply we did get is this P750 Gold. This is a gigabyte fully modular power supply. Okay, so this power supply we're going to use. The beauty of this power supply is you only use the cables you need. The rest of it is you can put in a bag. So we're going to plug 4 cables into this thing and be done. And it's a gold power supply, which means it's going to be, the efficiency is going to be excellent. All right. Let's see what we got. Fan control. Reset power switch. Okay. So we're going to turn this this way. Then we're going to eyeball, okay, so on this, where do these all go? So we need to run the power up here. I'm not worried about that. We need to run, the USB can go down to the bottom or on the top. So let's do this. What is this wire? Why is it like that? It's like salad. Where is the USB? USB. So this cable, get out of the way. These are fans. These are fans, so this is what. This is spare. So we're going to push these wires through the bottom. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to wire here. Let's see here. Where's my zoomer? Okay, so wiring. So these wires all have a purpose. They're labeled individually on the actual wire here. It'll say audio. On this motherboard, they're labeled too. If you pull out the motherboard manual itself, it'll tell you exactly where they go individually. I've been doing this too long, so I know where they go, and it's also labeled on the board too. But each one has a specific place that they go in and functions different things. Like this USB cable powers all the fans in the fan header. This particular USB cable powers all the USB ports. This particular cable does the audio on the front. So the way I wire these pretty much is get them untangled. Okay, so we have these wires off to the side. This particular wire goes just like this. Into this USB port, there's a little notch on the top of these ports that tell you the direction that it goes in. So I turn it. And then these you got to be really careful with. Snaps into place. You got to be really careful with these because if you push it in too hard and put it in the wrong way, you bend the pins and then it becomes a nightmare. So audio, I run through this little hole here along the bottom of the motherboard. And over here it's JAUD1, which you can't see. And pretty much there's a little blocked out pin on the top of here. Once again, it's a guide to tell you which one you pop in. And it's as simple as so that's done. Okay, and then power, reset. So I've memorized where these go in, but you'll need to reference the manual to tell you this is where these go in individually. So power LED goes plus minus from the edge. So up at the top here. We're going to need a little extra light. Let's get some extra light going so you guys can see and I can see. Okay, so each individual one, reset switch. So reset switch goes right here. So reset switch goes there. Power LED plus and minus go at the top in the corner here. Then power switch goes right up top here. And sometimes there's a hard drive LED one that goes low here, but this, since it's an internal drive, it doesn't need it. So once we got that in, we wrap the wires up nice and neat in there. So you guys can see it's nice and neat down there, just the way we want it. Minimalize wires. Now, I'm kind of anal with my builds. I'm looking at this wire here, and I really don't like where it's oriented here. There's another space for it to be put here. I think I'm going to reorient that. So we're going to pop this out. Okay, and it takes a little bit of force, just give it a good tug. And then we're going to relocate this wire. So we're going to relocate her, make sure it's not conflicting, right here. You guys can see, instead of it sticking out up here on this build, it's going to go right in this edge. And this can be kind of tricky because getting it in there can be very tricky. But it looks so much better in my opinion. So just quickly, we're going to indulge me. Okay. So in where this spot, now look at it instead. So now we can hide this wire a little bit better under the bottom of this case. So this is here, and now it's hidden over here in the corner instead. Instead of it just sticking out and making it kind of ugly, it's off to the side. Okay. So we got our power supply in, we got our USB in, we have, where'd that other secondary USB go? There was a secondary USB and I don't see it. Did I pull it through? Yep, here it is. So this USB plug that we're going to install. So this USB plug is to power the hubs, the USB hubs in the back, and there's going to be more of these. So I'm going to run this under the bottom. We're going to look at it. Usually it goes labeled up and in. There we go. JUSB in. So you guys can see your wires over here on the side. And usually it make the nice little gator teeth look a little bit nicer. Boom. There's your wiring on the bottom. Okay, so we got audio in, we got USB in, we got USB front panel, back panel in, and we have the power switches in. So all of these things are done. Okay. So everything looks good here. All right, so we have all this installed now. So the next thing we're going to move on to, I think it's time to put in the other fans. So, gonna grab more fans, and more screws. You got it. Okay, so once again, orientation. So now we're thinking about fans again. So we're talking about the bottom of the case, and we're talking about the top of the case. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. And you have to think about your GPU. So your video card is going to be oriented like this on the side. Let's zoom this out so people can see. So your GPU is going to be sitting here like this. The fans are going to be facing down. So what we can do is we can set these so they're like this. They're going to suck air from the bottom of the case and throw it right at your GPU to keep it cool. Does that make sense? And then from the top of the case, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in air in here. We're basically going to inundate this whole thing and create an air swirl in here. Okay? And then the swirl is going to get sucked up by the fan, take all the heat, and just pull it on out. Okay? So we're going to orient them upward. Again, important to know, you have to think about these things. So these cool little vents on the bottom. And then fan screws and my driver. Getting caught. Okay, so this fan, we're going to look at it and see how we want it oriented. We'll go like this. And we're going to put it in. Okay, so fan one in. More fans. More. More fans, please. Fan number 92. Okay. Screwdriver. Alright, we're getting there. There we go. Okay, so now bottom fan's in. So remember how I told you we're going for the coffin look on this thing, so we're going to coffinize it, and you were a little worried about it but this case is ideal for that. The other one, the Leon Lai case, is really nice. It's more expensive because of the fans, and it's just too, I think it was just too big. You would have had a big, what's that? There would have been probably a gap about here from the edge of your motherboard to the fans, and it just would be dead space, and I was like, why? You know, it ended up being more expensive because we'd had to buy another, because it didn't come with these. You'd had to buy the fronts, the backs, so we'd had to buy 12 fans. And those are not cheap fan kits. You know, the kits are well over $100 a piece. So it's like, just would have added and added and added. Would it have looked a little cooler? Sure, maybe a little cooler, but I like this case. So you got the two on the bottom here, looking real fly. Now, where's my other thing? Am I missing fans? 1, 2, 3. You know what? Where's my other fan? And we're having a moment. We're having a senior moment. I used 3. Oh, 3. You know what, dude? We shorted you 2 fans. I did not count right, so there literally is more. So for this purpose, we're gonna put 2 fans in here for this purpose. We won't put the fans here for now, but I will get you the 2 fans. So there should be 2 fans here. Just FYI, I didn't count, I guess I miscounted. Hold on, I might have some. I might have LL fans. maybe not. I did not shorten the fence. I actually have 2 spares, which we are going to put in. So just give me a moment. Can't believe I forgot 2 fans. Thought I ordered everything. Apparently I'm horrible at counting. Give me 1 sec. That was a horrible thing. Voila. All right, 2 more fans. Why not? So, you know one thing I didn't think of? One thing I didn't think of. So the radiator sits really high on top of this thing, as you guys can see over here. I don't know if we can put a fan there. No. What we'll do is we'll still put the 1 fan in. We're going to put 1 because this radiator's too tall. I did not foresee that occurring because this is a massive radiator set. If it was a 280 millimeter, it would go anywhere, but it's because we're using up a lot of extra space. The beauty of it is I don't think it's going to matter because this RGB would be really bright against this one. I don't think you'd really see this one a whole lot. I think you'd see this one. So it's still going to look great. It's just not going to have one here. So that's the breaks, unfortunately. And a lot of these quirks you just don't know till you get in the case. But that's okay. No, at this point we're all aesthetics, dude. We're doing unicorn now. This is all these. To be honest with you, the fans on the top and bottom are totally optional. The rainbow unicorn. That's awesome. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So yeah, so we're gonna put it in there. Oh wait. No, it's. You're making me question. Yes, maybe. Hold on. This is like I said. It's you have to diagram it because it's like. Now I'm starting to think it should bring it out. It should be a secondary out. We have too many fans in here. Yeah, I think it should be a dual exhaust. And the only reason why I say that now is you got 1, 2, 3 on the front pushing air, 1, 2, 3 on the back pushing air, 2 in the bottom pushing air. So you're going to have a massive vortex here. I hope this fan has enough CFM to push it. I'm worried you're going to have a heat bubble in here because this fan's not going to be fast enough to bring it all out. So yes, let's do 2 exhaust and see how it goes. Yeah, let's do 2 exhausts. I think that's where my brain was going, but you made me question it for a second. And at this point, realistically, because you're using a radiator, it doesn't matter a whole lot. But I think we should do 2 exhausts. But what this is going to do is it's going to cut down on the heating bill in your room because this sucker's going to get hot. This will rise the temperature in your room under full load, probably 5 to 7 degrees. If your room is cold, it's going to get warm. In the summer, dude, you're going to be cooking like a chicken, just like the rest of us gamers. Is your room upstairs? Oh, good. That's a plus. My office is upstairs. In the summertime, even with the AC on blast, forget it. My system, it makes it so hot because it's just so beefy, you know. You know, it's just too much. You know, and it cooks my room. I just end up, I have to put a fan, and then I put a fan twice the size of this in there just to circulate the air because it gets so hot. Huh. What's that? Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where just a part of gaming. It gets warm. I mean, the system's designed for power and speed. It's going to get hot. That's why we put the big radiators in here, but they do dissipate more heat, and by doing so, add more heat to your room. But the goal should be to cool down your CPU and keep your components cool. Okay. All right, fan in, fan in, fan in, fan in. Everything looks good over here. That's good there. All right. So you guys can see the progress of where we're at here. Let's see here what else needs to go. Okay. So now let's clean up some of these stuff, and then we'll move on to power cables. Yeah, power supply will be easy. That, and then connecting all of your RGB cables together is going to be fun. We're just going to clean some of this stuff up real quick. All right, we're getting there. So now let's move on to the power supply. So looking at the system setup as we can see it now, she's looking pretty beautiful. And we added more wires. So we got a lot of wires going on here. Wire a jungle, which is fine. To be expected. Don't ever open the bathroom. It's going to explode on you. Okay, so we got all these wires. Now let's do the power supply. So let's get this sucker out. Brand spanking new, Gold Series. So power supplies, pretty simple. Not a whole lot to it. You have your beautiful gigabyte supply. This one is a really nice one. So if you're looking at this power supply, so see how you have these connections here, right at the top here. So you guys can see all of your connections have holes, just like anything else. We're only going to use the cables that we need to use for this specific build. We don't need to use extras. And what this does is it cuts down on the amount of wires you have going on the back of your case. So we're going to use power, we're going to use CPU power, the ATX power for some of the other peripherals, and your GPU, and that's it. So it saves like 6 or 7 cables that on a normal power supply you'd have this big bundle of cables coming out, so we're not going to do that. So we're looking at the top down again, and we'll zoom it out. So you can see all these wonderful wires that we have. So your power supply on this case goes in the back in the little corner here. So this little corner here is where it's going to go. In a lot of cases it sits in the front where you can see it. This case it's kind of hidden in the back. That's why we didn't do an RGB power supply, because it was pointless. You can't see it. Why pay extra for that? Instead I went with a higher level of power delivery instead of RGBs and stuff. Does that make sense? So let's get this off. So it just goes in this wonderful little bracket here on the back. So your orientation should just be pretty simple. Should just slide in just like this. So it goes one way, it orients one way. That you'll know it's the correct way when you can see the screw holes line up with the holes. The fan is the big part. Now looking at the back of your case, what did I do with it? Where did I put it? Oh, here. So this is where it becomes very important. So the fan on this is going to be sticking up. On this case, this vent here needs to be where the power supply is going to be, because your power supply is going to need to draw in air through here to keep itself cool and expel it out the back. So you always want to make sure the fan is facing towards the hole. If it's in the bottom of your case, it faces that way. If it's on the side of your case, just make sure the fan is exposed to air. If not, you'll suffocate it and kill it within a month. All right? Simple. So you should have got some more screws. Some of my spares. Into my little spare screw cache. Simple as that. Now I will tell you the scariest part of these whole builds is the fan, power supply system, not the fan, the power supply. The failure rate on power supplies are quite high. I did not pre-test this one, we took it out of the box. But I'll just warn you ahead of time, the failure rate is high. Out of all the machines I've built, the power supply has been the culprit on probably 60% of all initial problems. All I'm saying is cross your fingers. I mean, chances are low, I'm just pre-warning you. Okay, so power supply is in. So as simple as that, not super hard, not super difficult at all. And then it comes with a bundle of cables. So you get this bundle of cables. A lot of these come with actual bags, which this one for some reason did not. Shame on you, Gigabyte. So you have all of your different power cables here, and they're all labeled to do different things. This big, long, fat one is your CPU. So for your build, I wanted to make sure we went a little bit more cool than what we're doing. So what we did, we got you some red braided extensions. So these are going to go in the front where the power supply actually, you see the wires, you're not going to see these bulky ugly things. And it's just going to add another layer of just straight coolness to the build. They're not very expensive, easy to braid as you can see, and all they do is just extend it. So what we're going to do here, like I said, when we go all out. So pretty much it's going to be as simple as this. You're going to take this cable. Oh wait, this goes in the motherboard. You're going to snap this extension into this. So this will go out to the motherboard, and this is going to go into your power supply itself. Oh, my finger. So we're going to snap this part in. So power supply part 1 in, power supply part 2 in, so it's snapped in, as you can see, into here, so we're good. This is going to stay behind, and then when we do your wire routing, which we'll do in a minute, this is what you're going to see. That's piece 1, we need one for that. This is CPU, so we need one for your CPU. Okay, so that's the GPU. CPU cable, GPU, and CPU. Okay, so the CPU requires its own set of power. On that. Make sure it's not a split cable. There it is. That snaps in here. And then CPU PC. Okay, so this one's going to go to the CPU. Then the 3080, which we'll take out in a few, requires 3 12-pin connectors. Okay, massive amount of power. So basically all 3 of these are going to go into that sucker. It draws a ton of power. So we will connect these up. Yeah, it's massive, the amount of power it requires. So this is going to go into the unit. Here's one. Here's 2. And literally 3 PCIe. Now in the old school days, this much power would be enough for 3 video cards. Now 1 video card takes all that power. Just 1. Because it's a 3080, it's one of the most powerful video cards in the world. It draws a lot of juice. So, PCIe. Rail 1. And rail 2. Okay, so we have all of our extensions here for all of our cables. We'll do the others when we do the back wiring for the RGBs, but for now, we're going to do the front. Okay, so getting all these wires organized. Okay, so power we'll do first. We'll do CPU power. That's not it. That's not it. That is it. Okay. So I'm going to route that there. PCIe, I'm going to leave this. And then the CPU. Doesn't interfere with these. Just gotta orient these cables correctly. Act like there's like 1 million cables or something. 1 million cables. 2 million cables. Maglite. All right. So at a quick glance, you can see, at a quick glance, so you guys can see it. You guys can see, nice mag light. Nice mag light. Thought these things were tough. Liars. Okay, so you guys can see in the front here. So you have your red wires here, and then your red wires up in the corner, and then when the GPU is installed, you're gonna have red wires coming off the GPU. So it just adds a little bit of aesthetic to it, just makes it a little more pretty. So it doesn't look like basic, wires. Just looks a little bit different. So we got those wires in. We're gonna take these cables. We're gonna hide them up here for now. All right. All right, so in the back here, which you guys aren't going to be able to see really well, is these fan cables, 1,000,000 strong, back here. All right, now we need one of these to power a lot of the fans. So we're not going to do a whole lot of wire management at the moment. We're just going to get the cables where they belong. Turn it so I got some light. And this is where, like I said, newer builders tend to get kind of caught up because it's overwhelming. It's like there's so many wires. It's like what wire goes to what, and over time you kind of learn a lot of them are daisy chainable, but you just don't realize that when you're building for the first time. You're like, well, am I supposed to plug it into here? And it's like they end up just plugging them all in and just throwing them in there because it's just so frustrating. So the beauty of what Corsair does is they label a lot of these. It'll say 2 RGB hub to make it a little easier on you. So the RGB hub is right here on the inside. So basically it's telling you, put these into the RGB hub. Now, with all these fans though, it's a slight issue because the RGB hub only has 3 extra spots. So each one of these fans, they come with a kit. So they come with another hub. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we plug this USB into the other hub and the software will pick it up as a second hub and you'll be able to control it as hub 2. Does that make sense? So each one of these fan kits come with a hub because they realize that you got 3 fans, chances are you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fans. You know what I mean? It's an it's the same type of fan. So where is it? Up here. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same proprietary equipment. It's the same thing. Same type of connector. So oh no. He won't notice a difference. It's the same. This is just maybe a different configuration of it. They're both gonna be RGB. It's an RGB LL fan. It's the same thing. We'll take a look at it, and like I said, if it becomes an issue, we'll swap it. Sure. Okay, RGB hub 1. In. Number 2 in. And number 3 in from the front. The one thing that's important with these fans is you want to keep the fans in zones together. So we're talking about fans right now. I'm plugging into this RGB hub, which you guys can't see, but it's a mess back here. These fans are from the front. So the first 3 are going to go into the RGB hub on the front. The last 3 are going to go, the front 3 and the front case. This all is going to be one hub. Because you already have the 3 from the front here, then we have the 3 from the back of the radiator. That's zone 1. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put zone 2 in, and that's going to be fan, 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 zone 2, which when we get in the software, we'll set that up later. I'll teach you how to do that later. We won't do that on stream, but that's the software thing. So you can individually address every single light. You should be able to tell the lights individually. This one can be blue, this one can be green, this one can be red, this one can do, you should be able to individually address them. Yep. So 1, 2, 3 RGB hub from 1. Then there's also a hub here for a secondary RGB strip. If you wanted to add more lights, God forbid, you can. You can add more, which I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but hey, more power to you, dude. Okay, we got 1, 2. So this one, what happened to my fan controller? Need to find my fan controller. Where is my fan controller? They color code these wires with little stripping on it, so you know what's a fan wire and what's not a fan wire. Header wire. So 1, 2, 3. Look at all these wonderful wires. Wires. Okay, so we have 1,000,000 wires. So obviously this is the super boring part, getting all the wires organized so you know what goes to what. Air wire. Basically all these require power. And this one. And this one. That's quite the bit, man. Missing my fan controller hub. Alright, where'd my fan controller hub go? Okay, we are missing my fan controller hub, which is not good. What is this? Okay. It's got to go to a connector. So, what I'm realizing is this thing needs a Corsair Commander. Because there is not enough inputs for this. Yep, we'll need a commander. So what we can do in the meantime is we can test the RGBs. But this thing is going to need a commander, which I'm going to have to order. And what that does is it's a hub, a massive hub for fans. This hub has a few slots short of what I need, which is okay. We'll get that for you. I'm not worried about that. In the meantime, we're going to test to make sure all the RGBs are working. put on. Wait, there's more. There's more. So we're gonna put the other cables in. So the actual unit itself needs a USB. Just trying to install this one last piece here. Get this USB hub, wherever it is. Alright, so we're trying to install this. Just trying to get the last USB in. We can control all these fans, which we're working on. That's in. And then we just need to put in the one last thing. super boring part, guys. But a lot of this is necessary. Fan cables, anybody? Okay. All right. Alright, so we're getting close to a bench test. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take out the RAM. I'm going to snip the RAM, and we're using Trident Z RAM specifically for this. Pop this RAM out. Get the 4 sticks, so you have 32 gigs in here of RAM or jammer. Whoops. Wires. Okay, somebody's at my door. Come around the front, start the RAM, and I might reorient this fan cable. All the sticks of RAM are in. We'll do a power on test in a moment with no GPU for the moment. Supposed to be in a power on test, so you guys can see some of the fans are lit for the moment and our CPU cooler is lit. Good, that's just the beginning. No, not right now. No, there's some of them are disconnected because I need the hub. What's wrong? Yeah, it's gonna look weird. Just ignore the spinniness of it. I just wanted some to spin because so it keeps the CPU cool. So see how the temperature is upside down? We'll orient that in the software and we'll flip it. But you guys can see, as of now, like I said, we need the fan commander. So when I get the commander, so these will all be spinning. This will be lit, this will be lit. This is already lit, but you can already kind of start to tell the way it's shaping up. You know, obviously we'll flip this over in there, the orientation. I may have to flip it depending on where this cable, if it keeps hitting this thing, I may have to flip that. But you'll have RGBs here. But overall, the system is powered on. It's, you know, it's telling you it's 22 degrees Celsius. So, I mean, it's looking good. Everything looks good. So the one last test we'll do is we'll actually stick the video card in real quick. And we'll pop it on to give it a, make sure the power supply works properly with the card, make sure it boots into the BIOS, and the rest is all aesthetic stuff for me. So we had a good power on test. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the video card out now. We're gonna put the video card in. So this is an MSI Trio X high-end video card. So this video card is the video card we're going to use. It's an MSI Trio X 3080. The thing is massive. It's so massive it actually has a stabilizer bar to keep the weight off the edge of the motherboard, which we'll use after. But the thing is beastly. Oh boy. We might have to go vertical, guys. Might have to go vertical. I had a feeling that might happen, but once again, things you learn. I have a spare riser cable too, so we're good there. Yeah, this case is just, or the card's just massive. It's one of the biggest cards there is. So it's gonna sit just like this, along the edge. Look how massive this card is. So literally it's gonna sit to the edge of this. Look how freaking massive that is. That's unbelievably huge. It's gonna look awesome though. Whoa! What's that? It's gonna look amazing. I like it like this. Actually, let me put the riser cable in first. Get my riser cable out. I just gotta find my riser cable. And we're good to go. my riser cable. I know you're in here somewhere. Wasn't expecting to need it. Where the hell did Of course I lose things I need when I need them. Of course. Yeah, that's probably what I'm gonna do. Alright, we'll take a quick break on the stream, and then while I look for that riser cable, we'll be right back. All right, so we found the ribbon cable. We're gonna plug that in the front and swing around. So we need to use this ribbon riser cable to connect this GPU vertically. So the way you do this is this ribbon cable goes into this slot here, just like a regular GPU would. The case is here. So you snap that piece in, it hangs low. You take this GPU, and you're going to snap it into the actual ribbon riser, just like this. Okay, so it's snapped in, and then the card mounts vertically just as so. So it hides it. And we're going to take this. So, hey Devin, unfortunately this video card could not be mounted any way but vertical. This is too big for the case. It's too big. Whoa. Good catch. So huge, guys. So huge. Having trouble, Devin? There we go. He's like, I don't care, I'm having problems with my game. He didn't say a word, dude. He must be having difficulty. All right. It actually looks freaking awesome this way. That's why I told you I prefer horizontal mounts versus vertical mounts. That looks freaking awesome, dude. Looks like a frag box and a half. I just gotta, we'll cinch up these cords. I'm gonna take these wires, we're gonna group them down. Okay, so GPU's installed. We need to put the power, like I said before, for the GPU. And the power is requirements. Takes 3 of those plugs. It's absolutely massive. It's 300 plus watts of your thing. So no. Damn it. Okay, so power connectors. One, two, three. So it requires 8, 8, and 8, so 16 total. So like I said, massive amount of power required. Nope. Because it's vertical, like in a vertical orientation, doesn't need it. If it was horizontal, it's so heavy the GPU sags against the motherboard, it needs a stabilizer bar. That's how massive it is. I mean, it's for gaming. There's only one CPU faster than GPU, and it's on that wall. Mm-hmm. Well, 3090 would have been the card itself that you can turn on. $1,800 for 5% more performance increase. Serious? That's pretty awesome, dude. Don't screw it up. Keep trying. Okay, guys, so as you can see, the red just gives it just an aggressive look, like this is power. You know, red on red on red, and we'll clean this up. Like I said, this is nowhere near even done. This is just me slapping parts in. So all this stuff will be organized and to make sure they're not in the fans, because you got to watch out. A lot of these will grab the fans. But this red, just for $20 or $30, just gives it just makes it look not default. So we got your vertical orientation. You got everything in. Everything looks good. Slap it on. That's all laid. Yes. Yeah. Let me undo this. So we can probably pop onto the video card. Okay, so everything's the way it's supposed to be. Let's turn on the bias mode and let's see her fire up. So on stream, we'll turn on bias. Where is it? Hold on, let me turn on the bias screen. Okay, so we're going to give the bias screen a shot. So like I said, we'll reverse the orientation of the GPU in a minute. See if I can get it on the screen. Trying to get the bias up. Sometimes the whipsaw does not like to give it to me. Let's switch to here and see what's going on with this whipsaw. Is the fans are spinning on the GPU? Nice. Let's try to get the whipsaw to display the bias, which I'm having trouble with. Yep. Come on, Ripsaw. Give me. Hold on. Oh no, why is it? I can hear it. There we go. We're trying to recapture the bias here. Just a second here. one sec while we technical difficulty here. I don't know why the rip side's not giving me the bias, but. Right, hang on guys, we're still working on getting the bias screen to display. For some reason it does not want to cooperate. Hang on guys, I'm still trying to get this thing to cooperate here. For some reason it's not cooperating with me. Everything's on. There it is. There she goes. And we're live. Okay. So you guys can see on the, what does the dial in the middle say what the temperature is? Okay, so it's roughly the same. Usually it's within a few degrees of what the bias says. It takes a little while to update. So it's 30 degrees Celsius. So it's close. So you guys can see, you'll probably be able to see up there when it pops up there. So obviously the temperature is super important. The 26 is great. So you can see what the default temperature and everything's at. We hide the front cam so we can see all the BIOS, what's going on. So getting to the BIOS for most PC builders is it's like you know what I mean, because having it boot at all and recognize the CPU and launch and recognize the RAM is some of the biggest like moments for people when they start computers. I bet 99% of first-time builders, when they hit the power button, doesn't do anything, and it's usually because of a loose wire or something's not configured right. So BIOS is huge. I'm not worried about it, but people get worried about it. So we can see 29 degrees Celsius. It's detecting all your RAM. So it says we have 32 gigs of memory. All those G-Skill RAM is in there. You guys will see that in a second here. It's seeing your 2 gigabytes of storage. So these are the things that we want to know. It sees the fans and fan controllers. So we'll put on the hardware monitor. Okay, so this all looks good. I've already flashed it, so we don't need to worry about that. Gigahertz. Okay, so this is detecting everything it needs to detect. It's detecting the GPU. Let's do this real quick. XMP on. Let's restart it and see how it's going here. We'll get it to Windows real quick, take a look at the orientation, and then that'll be it for now. But overall, the system is working as intended. I love the vertical orientation of the GPU. It looks freaking phenomenal like that. Yes, 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 yes. Notice. We get it. Should boot off of my USB stick. Yep, and we're going into Windows. So obviously we need to get a commander for this thing so I can wire the back. That'll take a couple of days. So I can wire it properly, get all the RGBs working, get everything functioning the way it's supposed to, and get it set up. But what I wanted to test, what you guys can see, is basically, forget the back and some of the fans, you guys can already see what it's going to look like. And I apologize, I didn't have everything. Well, this particular build is more of a custom build. It's not one of those builds where it's like puzzle pieces. This one's like there's a lot to it. There was more fan wires than I expected, and I should have counted. There's about 4 more than I expected it to be. The commander will control all of that. So we're going to put Windows 10 Pro on here. Yeah, what we need to do. So, or I can give you guys a link and you can do it. Yeah, because it's not in the original budget. Let's just throw this on here real quick. I'm trying to remember hotkeys because I don't have my mouse connected. Oops. All right, so let's take a look from the front. While this is doing that, let me put the front view back up. So we got this build going. So we'll pop this in so people can see. Whoa. Just put that in the corner. And like I said, we'll flip the orientation of it over. Obviously, I knocked it down. It will. To the point where you shouldn't worry about it at all. With this setup, it'll manage itself. The fans are PWM fans or power management fans. They automatically will spool up and down depending on how much you need to do. Wow, that thing's gorgeous. And we have to turn on all the RGBs so you can see the dripping. You'll be able to control all of that. You'll be able to control what the RAM is doing, how it's going to, you can make it bleed, you can make it rain. You'll be able to control all the fan lights. What's that, I'm sorry? Up to you. The red is just, the reason why I like red with RGB is it doesn't attract your attention. It's kind of subtle. But if you look in there, you know it's aggressive. Doesn't get to deal with it. Virus software is scam. Yeah, Windows Defender is fine. Yeah, virus software is one of the biggest rackets there is. Yeah, I worked at Apple for over 6 years. Yeah, it was great. It's just, it's a high-strung job, I'll tell you that. I launched the original iPhone with the team. I have an original iPhone in a box that's never been opened. Yeah, it was given as a gift to us. Yeah, just brand new in the box, never been opened. It still has a seal on it, and it's an ultra low serial number. It's one of the first ones off the manufacturing. Yeah, eventually I have no idea. It's in my safe with the rest of my stuff. I'm sorry? Oh yeah, but just all original, never been opened. Yeah, original model. Yeah, so I kept it in the box because it was a gift. I already, you know. So what am I doing here with this? Let's see. So it's getting there setup wise. Yeah, I mean you have Wi-Fi. It's got the Wi-Fi 6. It's got all that built in. Yeah, I know. I don't know why this screen always does this. I just skip past it. I don't know why it does that on that screen. So once it gets in the Windows, we can install the XT cam. And I can flip the orientation of that. Make your own Microsoft account later. Yeah. What do you want me to name the login? We're not going to put a password on it. All right, people, at this point, we're going to end the regular stream for the build because the build's pretty much 90% done. The rest is going to require some equipment that I don't currently have. So, but the build is pretty much done. You guys can see what it looks like here. We do have some wiring to do with the fans. The bottom fan and top fan is going to need to be rewired so we can get that RGB working, but that'll be working as well. We need to flip the orientation of the NZXT, which we need the software, and we need to make sure everything is functioning, but we're 90% of the way there. So I appreciate you guys watching the channel for this. Tune in again. We'll be doing multiple builds on here up in the future. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.